adaptation like this, what do you prefer? Like picking out the best parts, or just trying to be faithful?
It's really just about telling the story and being you're faithful to the spirit of the book. Then I think you've done your job. Luckily, in this instance, the books are so well plotted out and structured that we can be really close to them. It's been one of the most fun adaptations. A lot of the story work has been done by Ty and Daniel, and what we get to do is really focus on how we should tell it, that's where all our work goes. And it's a real heavy lift because there's a lot of ways to tell a story this vast and they have these great novellas, and they have the book. We're intersecting the books, so we're pulling things forward. The novellas are so damn good, we can't not use them, so we end up weaving those in. And so that's where we spend most of our work, is trying to bring it to life and make their universe kind of all swirl together as one. But we don't have to. It's almost like hard to choose what to keep and what to move past, because there is so much amazing material. So that's a unique problem with an adaptation. Usually you have to really reinvent it for the screen, and this one we're just really just trying to make it keep the spirit of it, but deepen the conflicts and deepen the characters and go places where they didn't have time for in the books. And I think the novellas are an amazing way into seeing what the literary aspirations of what they want to do on the side of, in between the cracks of the novels, there's all these other stories, and on the screen and on a TV show we get to bring those all together, and that's what we've been trying to do, is because the material is just an embarrassment of riches. It's insane. So that's not usually a problem with adaptations. It's usually you have to break it and put it back together. So that's not been the case here. So
there are a lot of great sci-fi books out there. What drew you to this series specifically?
Yeah, I think it just it was even the blurb on the back of the book jacket. Somebody had said, "Oh, it's like LA Confidential with fusion drives," and it just puts a picture in your head of a type of story. I love crime stories. I like sort of the Ridley Scott grounded science fiction of people just struggling through life, and it happens to be in a sci-fi setting. It's not about science fiction. It's not about technology necessarily. It's not about aliens. It's not about all that stuff. It's just about how do people react when we leave the planet, or we get the technology to do something. The way they said the way American life changed instantly when the railroads came, and you could suddenly leave your town and travel anywhere in the United States. That changed the whole face of American life overnight. It's that kind of story about people and what they go through when new technology changes the possibilities of their lives. And that just felt like I hadn't seen that story, and I wanted to. Science fiction just jumps to the technology, aliens, hyperdrive. We ignore science, we ignore physics. We just kind of skip all that boring shit and get right to the cool stuff. And you're like, all right, what's really cool is how we got there and how we figured all this out. And did the human soul change at all, or is it just we just move all our bullshit with us out into space or wherever else? Like that seems like the story, and it just felt like it hadn't been told. And when we read the books, we were like, these guys are planted in that world much more than I like that people were just real. They were struggling and figuring out life, and they were really relatable. And I love all the grand characters of science fiction, but I also want to know what the cops at the donut shop in space is thinking, or all the people who populate this world, who are not Adama or Picard or the genius thinkers with the big picture. Like, what's everybody else doing? And this story told that story, and so it just felt like a natural. It was like immediately, we're like, oh, somebody finally figured this part of the story out, and we just fell in love with it pretty immediately. So that was it was not a hard sell. I mean, it really was almost the book jacket. The way that critic had described it made me understand the show right away. It's a gritty thriller in a sci-fi setting. I mean, I don't know, just instantly conjured up what the show could be. So I thank that critic, whoever you are. It's on the back of the book. I don't know, I have to write that guy a note somewhere.
The first season. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. One of the things that I've always noticed about sci-fi shows, especially recently, is that they are allowing shows to be very grounded and have practical effects. One of the most iconic things in 12 Monkeys is the time machine travel chair, which actually exists. And Stephen Strait was talking about the expansive sets you guys had, and he talked about it last year as well. Did you feel, especially with this story being so grounded and wanting to feel real, did you really want to have a lot of practical effects and practical sets and things like that?
As much as possible, because they're just walking through these ships. I mean, they're real places. They sit in the chairs. They go out, and the whole Rocinante exists. It's a real ship. You can walk through it, and I know that these guys are really good. They can act against green. They can do lots of stuff, but it takes you out when you're on an arm being like. When you look at some of these early shots, there's just people stuck on a moving arm in a giant room full of blue, and they have to conjure up. I mean, you do that a lot, I think they're going to start acting a certain way that takes them out of the simple reality. So, as much as possible, we even went back to some of those, those Stanley Kubrick kind of, those really clever but real effects, like being trying to use objects instead of painting everything in later or saying, oh, we'll do it like actually have objects there, like have, if someone leaves a coffee cup in the air, like, it's a guy holding a stick, like, and like trying to do it simply and then paint that out as opposed to putting the whole thing in later and everyone has to pretend everything. It does matter, and I think it's in the vibe of the show to have it feel as real as possible, and so I mean, sometimes it's more expensive to do it that way, and they're like, no, we'll just do it later, and you're like, no, isn't this cheaper? They're like, no. And time as well to make a gag work is sometimes really. We had a really fun one the first season. They're in zero gravity. The guy hits the drive, and he's been drinking beer, and all his beer cans are floating around, and they all just fall when he hits his gravity drive, thrust gravity, all the beer cans. Those are just all on wires, and it was one of the funnest gags of the year, and it was just all old school fishing line and beer cans, So I have a soft spot for that, and we do as much of that as we can for sure.
The first season, it kind of like builds and builds and builds, and it takes a few episodes more to kind of wrap your mind around like the scope. And Stephen was saying the scale is going to get even bigger in season 2. Like, how do you like decide like where you need to like rein it in? You know what I mean?
I mean, I think you want to, when things get too epic at some point, when you're not spending time with your characters and what's going on in their heads, I think you can lose. You start getting into that science fiction as it's a concept now. You're so far back from it, you're not relating to anybody. So you want the events to get bigger and bigger and bigger, but still want to be in the heads and in the moments with these guys, always with the characters. And however, the conspiracy is going to get bigger and bigger, but hopefully you'll feel more intimate and get to know these people way more than, even though the size of the drama is like tripling. You're really, really spending time in their souls with them, and if we can do both, then I think that's what distinguishes the show. We can kind of do.
We're gonna wrap here.
Yeah. Okay.
Are you looking forward to like kind of exploring the dynamics between Miller and Holden this season?
Yeah, because they're both you have a guy who's sort of rediscovering idealism versus a guy who's losing his idealism at the same time, and it's a really interesting dynamic where one guy is, they always say they were Don Quixote kind of stories where one guy is becoming like a child again. He's forgot how to believe in anything, and he's sort of going back there. Another guy, all he does is believe in anything, but he's been in a very safe life. Now his life is getting really challenged, and he's losing that. And at the same time they meet, their idealism is getting tested in really different ways. So it's really cool to watch them teach each other like how to act, because they both are missing something the other one has at the moment, and so they become, weirdly, as much as they don't like each other, they kind of need each other at this point in the story. So it's a really lovely dynamic. But it is all about idealism, and I think what's really fun is to watch a guy like Miller who stopped caring about anything, to watch him realize that there might have been something he lost along the way. Like he might have been a better person at one point, and maybe there's a way to be that again. So it's kind of cool watching him struggle for that. So.